Welcome to Philadelphia, and as our tour guide Fati mentioned, it's the city of brotherly love. And Gert's living in America. I think there's a Philadelphia over there as well, but this is the Philadelphia of ancient times and the city of brotherly love. So let me read to you from Revelation chapter 3. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can obviously see it's cloudy, it's rainy, and let me read it to you. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things say, he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens doors and shuts doors. Now I just love the way that Jesus describes himself there. He first of all says that he's holy. And the moment I read those verses last night in preparation, the moment I hear the word holy, I go back to Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah has that vision of the throne room of God. And what does he see? He sees the seraphim all around the throne, and day and night they're crying out, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. So Jesus says, I'm holy. But not just that, he also describes himself as true. And like at Laodicea, we spoke about the fact that Jesus always tells the truth. To each one of these 7 churches, he tells them the truth. Sometimes they need to hear encouraging things, good things, and sometimes they need to hear difficult things. But one thing we love about Jesus, he never tries to deceive us. He never tries to pull the wool over our eyes. He tells us the truth, and that's because he is the truth. John 14:6, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. He's altogether true. But then very interesting, he says that he has the key of David. Now when Jesus uses the phrase the key of David, he's not just making up something. He's actually quoting directly from Isaiah 22, a prophetic statement concerning the coming of the Messiah. The Messiah would have the key of David. And so Jesus, by using that phrase, is saying, actually, I'm the one that Isaiah prophesied about all those years ago. I hold the key of David. And when you think of a key, you think of someone who has access. Someone's able to access places. They've got authority. They possess things. So Jesus has access to the treasures, the resources of heaven. And he's able to access places that maybe other people can't access. And that's why he says here, I open doors that no man can close, but also close doors that no man can open. So in your life, if you think about it from your life, maybe a good prayer to pray would be, Lord, as I journey through life, I trust you to open doors that no man can close, but also trust you to close doors that no one can open. And if I think back over my life, if I look back at my life, some of the things I thought were amazing opportunities at the time, God closed those doors for me, and he opened other doors that set my life on a whole new trajectory. So that just speaks of the sovereignty of Jesus. Just rest in him. Don't fight against God. Work with God. And often you look back in hindsight over the course of your life and you just see the invisible hand of God opening doors, creating opportunities, closing doors, and causing you to walk in the ways of God. But then he comes with some encouragement to these guys. And he says, I see your works. And he says, I see that you have little strength. These guys were living, I think if Fati had to give you more background, you'd recognize there was a big temple of Artemis here, I think, Fati, or a big pagan temple.
Big temple.
A big temple was in the city, a big pagan temple, and idol worship was rife over here. So you can imagine being a Christian surrounded by paganism and idol worship. It was a very difficult place, a very challenging place to be a Christian. And so Jesus says, you know what, I actually see. I know, in fact the words he uses, I know you're struggling, I know it's difficult to be a Christian in this area. And just to encourage you guys, that Jesus knows. He knows what you're going through. He knows the challenges you're facing. He knows those times when you feel weak and have little strength. I just find that so encouraging that nothing about our lives is hidden from Jesus. He knows. He knows you have little strength. And whenever I hear those words, little strength, I think back to Paul, where he was really crying out to God, begging God to take away what he called a thorn in the flesh. Something was troubling him. We don't know what exactly it was. But God actually answers him in a very surprising way. He says, Paul, actually, I'm not going to take away that thorn in the flesh. And we know it couldn't have been his wife because he wasn't married. It was some other thorn. And God says, I'm actually not going to take away that thorn, because that thorn's being used to humble you. It's being used to keep your feet on the ground. But what you are going to find is that my grace will always be sufficient for you. And listen to this, my strength will be made perfect in your weakness. The penny drops. Paul says, okay, now I get it. So then I will gladly boast in my weakness, that the power of God may rest upon me. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. So I just encourage you to journey through life. You can either be self-reliant or you can be God-reliant. I would encourage you to be God-reliant, living in the grace and the strength of God. And then something very interesting. He speaks of the synagogue of Satan in verse 8. Those who say they are Jews but are not. So those were people like Saul before he got converted. Remember, Saul was a Jew, he was a Pharisee, and he thought by persecuting Christians he was doing a good thing. He thought he was doing an honorable thing for God. He was living in a place of deception. But God gives a promise. He says, I will make them, those of the synagogue of Satan, come and worship before your feet. And I will make them worship before your feet to know that I have loved you. So in other words, God says, I will be your vindicator. I will prove to your enemies that I love you, that you belong to me. And guys, just to encourage you, I'm almost done, but just to encourage you in your own lives, when you're on the wrong side of injustice, as all of us have been from time to time, when things don't go your way, just learn to rest in the vindication of God. Don't try and fight your way out of it. Don't try and prove yourself to be right. Over the years, I've just rested in God and say, God, you are my vindicator and you will sort things out for me. I'm not going to lose my peace over unfair criticism. I'm not going to lose my peace over people who would like to slander me. I'm going to rest in you and trust you to be my vindicator. And then, of course, Jesus ends off like he does with all of the letters. He says, he who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So this is the city of brotherly love, the Church of Philadelphia. And I hope you enjoyed that little bit of background. Thank you, Fatih.
Thank you, Mark.